approaches to formatting a table of contents in InDesign. And many of these, not all, will involve tabs, which are one of the more useful features in InDesign that most people have not come across by the time they're in 3.13, but can be really useful for things like tables of contents. Now, everyone's table of contents, who's taking the class anyway, needs to have two levels of hierarchy. And as I said in the earlier video, that usually means that your features get one level of hierarchy and your smaller items, things that would be in your briefs, get another. And where you draw the line between telling too much and not enough on the table of contents is something that you will work out as part of the design process. But for something like a brief section, some magazines would list every story in it. Some would say list the top first three stories and say and more. Some would just write a little summary. There's a lot of different approaches text-wise, and so there's also a lot of different approaches typographically. So here I have features, and I already have a level of hierarchy going in that these have decks, and they also have bylines. And these do not have decks. These are just sort of a list of stories which might appear in a magazine section. So one of the things you can do is just hang your number. And there are a couple of ways to do this. I tend to use the special character. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down my command or button if you're on a Mac and hit backslash. And nothing happened. And that is because this is on and this line are on separate paragraphs. But if they were on the same paragraph, let me just delete that. Oops, that's exactly the opposite of what I would do. Let me bring that together, and then I'm going to hold down my Shift key and hit a return. And that is what's called a soft return in InDesign. We can see my invisible character, so that little spike there is just an invisible character. I'm going to hit my W key and make that go away. And now this is hanging in the margin, and so the number becomes kind of like a bullet in a bulleted list. It's in the margin, getting attention, and that's going to be true for every line that is still in this paragraph. So I could just add more to it, and it's always going to hang there. But then if I hit a hard return, just a regular return, then we go back to our regular margin. If I was doing more than a few of these, there are other ways of doing that that might be a little bit better. But if you just need a quick hang at the spur of a moment, I think that's a nice thing to use. And let me just put a little bit of extra space between that one and the next one. Now, another thing for sort of like doing the hang, but even more so that you see a lot of magazines do, is just treating their page numbers like drop caps that might start a paragraph. So to do that, what I'm going to do is this paragraph, and go to my drop-down menu. Ooh, going off the screen, but go to drop caps and narrow nested styles. We see enough of that to know where we are. And here we have it. And I'm going to cancel out of that because I just want to do it to this paragraph, not both of them. And those still are on separate paragraphs, drop caps and nested styles. So it's a 2 number, so I'm going to make it let's preview that so we can see it while it's going. And I am going to make it a 2 character drop cap so we get both of the numbers. And that might be a nice way of doing a feature as well. And that could be splashy. That could be part of what signals that your features are features is they get the big number. And so that looks good. And I could add a little bit of space between those. I probably would as well. Now, I have set some tabs here on all of these, but this first line, I'm just going to hit a tab, and then I'm going to hit a tab again. And those are just the default tabs. And if you're using the default tabs, they're just pretty unattractive and pretty unuseful. But I am going to set up some custom tabs. So I'm going to go to Type, and tabs, and that brings in my tab menu. Now, when people see this for the first time, they almost always grab this guy here. And this is not a tab, this is your left margin control. So I could bring this down and change my margin, which also changes my tab. Oop. And it's broken in two because it's another way to do a hanging indent if you want to. And there's a similar one over here that brings in your right, but I'm not going to mess with that. I'm going to click on my tab, and then you just go to where you want a tab and you click. So let's put that about there. So now I have sort of like one default tab that is getting a little bit messed up. But let's just move that over a little bit. And I'm actually, with this tab selected, I'm going to change what kind of tab it is. I'm going to change it to a right tab. So now all my numbers are indented right. And that's nice because it's A, a little bit less distracting visually, and B, it's like if we had a column of figures, our ones column is lined up and our tens column is lined up. And if we had another number, this theoretical magazine doesn't go past 80 pages, let's say. So they line up and it looks a little bit more nice. So I'm just going to click again. And that's also a right tab, which in this case I don't want. So I'm going to convert it to a left-hand tab. And I'm just going to bring them a little bit closer together. A little bit closer to the edge. And you can move those around. You can have as many tabs as you want. And that can be a nice way of emphasizing it. And I would probably also spread these out. And everything we're doing with the tabs, by the way, can be built into your style sheets. I'm not going to make style sheets today, but anything we did here, if we did the same technique from the previous film and we just said new style sheet, where that tab is and that location, that would all be built into this text. So sometimes, and this is a little bit not so much seen in modern magazines, but since I'm talking about tabs, I want you to know some of the other things tabs can do. Is sometimes numbers will line up across the right, and these are already on tabs, and if I just hit my W key again, you can see the invisible character for the tab, the invisible character for my extra return, and so you can line these up. So in this case, I probably also want a right tab. So let's just select my right tab to begin with and click over here. I think let's move it a little closer so we can see it. How about that? And so those are all lining up on the right. Now, the other thing you could do with a tab, and this is really old-fashioned, but you used to see this, sometimes you occasionally see this in books, especially older books, is you can give a tab a leader. So with that tab still selected, which it is, I'm just going to, have a dot. And then I'll click out of that. Didn't get it. Hit return. And now I have a dot leader that is connecting the story to the line. And it's a little bit reader friendly to have something like this. I think it's a little bit ugly, but it's a little bit reader friendly because there's no chance you'll lose which number aligns with which item with the leader. And a leader can actually be more than one character. So I can add a space to that and hit return again. Though I only did it to this one. Let's do it to all of them. Let's add that space. And there we go. And so it's a little bit of a less dense leader. It's a little bit less distracting. Now, I do sometimes use leaders when I am designing forms, which I've not had to do in a while now. But if I made this leader a underscore, let's do that to all of them again. We make that a underscore. It's not an underscore. That is a... Oh, because I do not... Do I have it selected? Let us select it. Okay, and now I have an underscore. I have a space. I'm not. But usually that would be a solid line. I think I must have something not quite right there. But I do sometimes use it to make fillable forms in InDesign. I'm more likely to use anchored rules these days, but you can sometimes use a leader as well. And if your leader is ever too dense or not dense enough, you can track it in. I'm just holding down my Option key to tighten that up a little bit. Now, the other thing you can do if you ever get into financial documents, and annual reports are a lot less common than they used to be, but sometimes you have columns of figures and you want those to line up, and where you usually want those to line up is on a decimal. So I'm just going to tab these out. And I am going to select the decimal tab, and this allows me to align on the dot. And then you see that there I have a fillable field. Oops, we didn't do it to all of them. Let's do it for all of them. And it's a fillable field, so I could actually make this align on any character I wanted. It doesn't have to be a dot, but that's what's most common. And now these, even my very, very unattractive number, are all lining up, and I can add digits to these, and it doesn't change the alignment because it is aligning on that dot all the way across. And even this one, which doesn't have a decimal, but it's kind of implied by its absence, InDesign is smart enough to align that up at the right place as well. So those are a few techniques for setting up your table of contents.